Groups. Humans are social animals. We belong to groups, try to please others, and look to others' behavior for clues about what we should do in public settings. In fact, our desire to fit in or to identify with desirable individuals or group is the primary motivation for many of our consumption behaviors. Social identity theory argues that each of us has several selves that related to groups. We think of ourselves not just as I, but also as we. Social power. Social power describes the capacity to alter the actions of others. The degree which you are able to make someone else do something regardless of whether the person does it willingly or you have power over that person. The following classification of power help us to distinguish among the reasons a person exerts power over another, which is referent power, information power, legitimate power, expert power, reward power, and coercive power. The following classification of power help us to distinguish among the reasons a person exerts power over another, which is referent power, information power, legitimate power, expert power, reward power, and coercive power. Information power. A person possesses information power simply because he or she knows something others would like to know. People with information power are able to influence consumer opinion by virtue of their access to the knowledge that provides some kind of competitive advantage. For example, editor. Legitimate power. Sometimes we grant power by virtue of social agreements such as the authority we give to police officer, soldier, and yes, even professor. The legitimate power of a uniform confers whilst authority in consumer context, including teaching hospital where medical students don white coats to enhance their standing with patients. Marketings borrow this form of power to influence consumer. For example, an ad that shows a model who wears a white doctor coat adds an aura of legitimacy or authority to the presentation of the product. For example, I'm not a doctor, but I've played one on TV. Expert power derived from the knowledge he possesses about a content area. This helps to explain the weight many of us assign to professional critics' review of restaurants, books, movies, and cars. Even though with the advent of blogs and open source references such as Wikipedia, it's getting a lot harder to tell just who is really an expert. Reward power. A person or group with the means to provide positive reinforcement has reward power. The reward may be tangible or intangible. Next is coercive power. We exert coercive power when we influence someone because of social or physical intimidation. A threat is often effective in the short term, but it doesn't not tend to stick because we revert to our original behavior as soon as the bully leaves the scene. Next, I will talk about reference group. Just because we find ourselves in the company of others does not necessarily mean they impact what we say or do. A reference group is an actual or imaginary individual or group that significantly influence an individual's evolution, aspiration, or behavior. Reference group influence do not work the same way for all types of product and consumption activities. For example, we are not as likely to take others' preferences into account when we choose products that are not complex, that are low in perceived risk, or we can try before we buy. We often use the term reference group a bit more loosely to describe any external influence that provides social cues. Avoidance group. Reference group impact our buying decision both positively and negatively. In most cases, we model our behavior to be in line with what we think the group expects us to do. Sometimes, however, we also deliberately do the opposite if we want to distance ourselves from avoidance group. For example, nerds, druggies, preppies, rebellious adolescents. because your motivation to distance yourself from a negative reference group can be as powerful or more powerful than your desire to please a positive group. That's why advertisements occasionally show an undesirable person who use a competitor's product.
Hi, my name is Nur Fasha Nabila binti Sharon Zaman. So let's continue with conformity and brand communities. Conformity is a change in belief or actions as a reaction to real or imagined group pressure. In order for a society to function, its members must establish norms or informal rules that govern behavior. Without these rules, we would have chaos. For example, imagine the confusion if a simple norm such as always stop for a red traffic light did not exist. Imagine what will happen. So, we conform in many small ways every day, even though we don't always realize it. And unspoken rules govern many aspects of consumption. Although we also observe conformity in many settings. For example, just remember one high school. We don't mimic others' behaviors all the time. But what makes it more likely that we will conform? So, these are some common culprits. First, cultural pressures. Different cultures encourage conformity to a greater or lesser degree. Next, fear of deviance. The individual may have reason to believe that the group will apply sanctions to punish non-conforming behaviors. And next, group anonymity, size, and expertise. Groups gain in power, complaints, and increase. And next, susceptibility to interpersonal influence. These traits refer to an individual need to have others think highly of him or her. Second last, commitment. The more people are dedicated to a group and value their membership in it, the greater their motivation to conform the group wish. And lastly, environmental cues. People are more likely to conform when they make decisions in a warm room. So, let's move to brand communities. Brand community is a group of consumers who share a set of social relationships based on usage of or interest in a product. In virtually any category, you will find passionate brand community. For example, include the 3Com Ergo or 3, discontinued internet appliance, Apple Newton, discontinued personal digital assistant, and BMW Mini car. So, unlike other kinds of communities, these members typically don't live near each other except when they meet for brief periods at organized events or brand fairs that community-oriented companies. So, this event will help owners to bond with fellow and strengthen their identification with the product as well as with others they meet who share their passion. It will also give more positive feel about the sponsor's product as a result, and this enhances brand loyalty. They tend to forgive product failures or lapse in service quality, and they are less likely to switch brands even if they learn that competing products are as good or better. These community members become emotionally involved in the company welfare, and they often serve as brand missionaries because they carry its marketing message to others. When community members do more than help the product build buzz, their inputs actually create added value for themselves and other members as they develop better ways to use and customize the products. It is common for experienced users to coach newbies in a ways to maximize their enjoyment of the product so that more and more people benefit from a network of certified participants.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Trinabila Mituna Arzami. Now I will continue with the topic word of mouth communication. So, word of mouth communication is the most important driver of product choice. It is a product information that people communicate to other people. Word of mouth has a tendency to be more trustworthy and also reliable than information from other formal marketing channels. And unlike advertising, word of mouth often comes with social pressure to conform to these recommendations. Yet, despite the huge amount of money where marketers spend into highly priced advertisement, word of mouth is much more effective because it affects up to 50% of all consumer goods sales. Given that a big part of the topics where we talk about with our friends, family, and even co-workers on a daily basis is all about product related. For instance, where you compliment someone on her outfit and question about where she purchased it, or either suggest a new place to go to a friend, or complain to your neighbor about the poor service you could experience at the bank. Furthermore, studies in both industrial and consumer purchase settings support the notion that even while brand awareness is increased by impersonal sources of information, it is most likely that customers will always rely on word of mouth during the later phases of evaluation and adoption. Simply put, consumers are more inclined to acquire a product if they hear favorable things about it from their peers. When the customer is comparatively unfamiliar with the product category, word of mouth becomes very useful at this moment, because these circumstances frequently arise when dealing with new or technology advanced products, such as medications to prevent hair loss or anything related to smartphones. So in addition, talking gives the consumer the chance to come up with justifications for the purchase and win others over to their point of view. For example, the strongest predictor of a person's intentions to buy a residential solar water heating system is the number of solar heat users the person knows. Numerous professions like doctors, accountants, and lawyers, as well as service marketers like lawn care businesses and cleaning services, rely heavily on word of mouth to achieve their business goals. Next is buzz building, or so we call buzz marketing. Essentially, buzz marketing is a viral technique used to maximize word of mouth potential of a campaign or product. These conversations can happen either online or offline. When it is done right, they can massively increase online traffic, social following, and of course sales and leads. Buzz marketing involves building strong, runaway excitement around a product or services that is predominantly driven by close interaction with consumers and users. Buzz campaigns typically utilize word-of-mouth communication to spread the message, where users recommend products and services to their friends and relatives, who in turn spread a positive message to their own social circles. On the other hand, although word-of-mouth communication is a powerful weapon, unfortunately, it's a two-edged sword that cuts both ways for marketers. Informal discussions among consumers can make or break a product or source. Also, consumers pay more attention to the negative word of mouth compared to the positive ones. We are prone to give more attention to negative information than to the positive information, especially when considering a new product or service, and to spread the word about our unpleasant experience. Negative word of mouth consequently affects consumers' opinions toward a product as well as their intention to purchase it, decreasing the credibility of a company's advertising. Information tends to change as we pass it along to one another. Typically, the final message shows no resemblance to the original message. So this figure illustrates how a message can change as people reproduce it. They tend to change from ambiguous forms to more conventional ones as subjects try to make them consistent with their pre-existing schemas.
How do we find opinion leaders? The most commonly used technique to identify opinion leaders is simply to ask individuals consumers whether they consider themselves to be opinion leaders. Although respondents who report a greater degree of interest in a product category indeed are more likely to be opinion leaders, we must view the results of surveys that discover self-designated opinion leaders with some skepticism. Some people have a tendency to inflate their own importance and influence, whereas others who really are influential might not admit to this quality or be conscious of it if they are. The fact that we transmit advice about products does not mean other people take that as advice. Sociometric methods trace communication patterns among members of a group. These techniques allow researchers to systematically map out the interactions among group members. Like a Vaseline campaign in Alaska we described previously, this means we interview consumers and find out who they ask for product information. In many cases, one or a few people emerge as the nodes in a map, and voila, we have found our opinion leaders. This method is the most precious, but it is difficult and expensive to implement because it involves close study of interaction patterns in a small groups. For these reasons, it is the best to apply a sociometric technique in a closed, self-contained social setting such as in hospital, in prisons, and on military bases, where members are largely isolated from other social networks. Sociometric techniques don't just look at who talks to whom, they also consider the type of relationship among members of a social network. Tie strength refers to the nature of the bond between people. It can range from strong primary to weak secondary. Although strong ties are important, weak ties are as well because they perform a bridging function. This type of connections allows a consumer access between subgroups. For example, you might have a regular group of friends that is a primary reference group. If you have an interest in tennis, one of these friends might introduce you to a group of people in her dorm who play on the tennis team. As a result, you gain access to their valuable expertise through this bridging function. This referral process demonstrates the strength of weak ties. We use sociometric analysis to better understand referral behavior and to locate strengths and weaknesses in terms of how one's reputation flows through a community. To understand how a network guides what we buy, consider a study researchers conducted among women who live together in a sorority house. They found evidence that subgroups or cliques within the sorority were likely to share preferences for various products. In some cases, the sisters even shared their choices of private products.
Online social networks and brand communities. Social networks are sometimes called social graph too. This term may also refer to diagram of the interconnections of units in a network. Flows occur between nodes. Flows are exchanges of resources, information, or influence among members of the network. On Facebook, you share news, update about your life, opinions on your favorite books and movies, photos, videos, and notes. As you share content, you create flows from among those in your network. Next, standards of behavior. Rules that specify what members can and cannot do on the site. Some of these rules are spelled out explicitly. For information, if you buy an item on eBay, you agree that you have entered into a legal contract to pay for it, but many of them are unspoken. After that is member contribution. Member contributions, a healthy proportion of users need to contribute content. If not, the site will fail to offer fresh material and ultimately traffic will slow. Participation can be a challenge though. Remember the 80-20 rule we discussed way back in chapter 1? It applies to online consumption as well. The fact is that most members of online community are lurkers. After that is degree of connectedness. Powerful groups are cohesive. This means the members identify strongly with them and are highly motivated to stay connected. Online groups may even more cohesive than physical groups, even though many of the members will never meet one another in person. For example, compared to the 6 degrees of separation, now we discuss, the researchers estimate that Facebook's members on average have only 4 degrees of separation from each other. Okay, next is a social game. Social game is a multiplayer, competitive, goal-oriented activity with defined rules of engagement and online connectivity among a community of players. Successful mobile games such as Candy Crush, Angry Birds boast millions of avid followers. This application usually incorporate one or more elements of game design, such as leaderboards, that indicate how each player is doing relative to others in the game, and badges that show the community the challenges the player has mastered so far. Okay, next is game platform. Game platform refers to the hardware systems on which the game is played. Platforms include game consoles, are interactive electronic devices used to display video games, such as Sony's PlayStation 3, Microsoft Xbox 360, and Nintendo's Wii. Computers including both online games and those that require software installation on the player's computer hard drive, and portable devices that may include smartphones or devices specifically for gameplay, such as the Sony PSP or Nintendo DS84. Okay, after that is mode. Mode refers to the way players experience the game work. It includes aspects such as whether a player's activities are highly structured, whether the game is single player or multiplayer, whether the game is played in close physical proximity to other players or by virtual proximity, and whether the game is real-time or turn-based. Besides that, milieu describes the visual nature of the game, such as science fiction, fantasy, horror, and retro. After that, the last one is the genre of a game refers to the method of play. Popular genres include simulation, action, and role-playing. Simulation games depict real-world situations as accurately as possible. There are several subgenres, including racing simulators, flight simulators, and sim games that enable players to simulate the development of an environment. Among social games, simulations include the highly popular Farmville, Pet Resort, and Fishville. Action games consist of two major subgenres. There is first-person shooters, that is FPS, where you see the game as your avatar sees it, and third-person games. In role-playing games, RPGs, the players play a character role with the goal of completing some mission. Perhaps the best-known RPG started its life as a tabletop game.
Do you know about digital opinion leader? Digital opinion leader are people with a committed community or peers on one or more digital platform and active on a specific subject or therapeutic area. As traditional opinion leader, they can be academics or healthcare professional, but not for digital opinion leader. Okay, now have 3 points for digital opinion leader. Firstly, we saw that opinion leader that people who are more influential than most when they recommend purchases to others. In online groups, opinion leader sometimes are called power user. They have a strong communication network that give them the ability to affect purchase decision for a number of other consumers, direct or indirect. Much like their offline counterpart, power users are active participants at work and in their communities. Their social networks are large and well developed. Others trust them and find them to be a credible sources of information about one or more specific topic. They tend to have a natural sense of intellectual curiosity, which may lead them to a new sources of information. Secondly, Forrester Research has dubbed this brand-specific mention influence impression. In advertising lingo, an impression refers to a view or an exposure to an advertising message. Forrester estimates that each year, US consumers generate 256 billion influencer impressions as people talk about their life with each other, telling story and experience that invariably include brand. Okay, for lastly, 66 these influencer impressions are primarily delivered by US Eat. Only 6.2% of social media users are responsible for about 30% of this brand mentioned. Forrester called these influencers as mass connectors.
Okay, I'm going to talk about digital words of mouth. What is digital words of mouth? Viral marketing occurs when an organization motivates visitors to forward online content to their friends. The message quickly spreads, much like a cold virus amongst residents of a dorm, and it's usually take off when the online content is entertained or just a plain weird. Okay, there is no doubt many of us love to share the news with others, news about new style, new music, and especially new stuff that we have bought. Of course, we do this in form of online review in forum like YouTube or Instagram and so on. However, the urge to share even creates new genre of communication such as haul videos that features a proud fashionista describing clothing item that she just bought, and unboxing videos that illustrate in painstaking detail exactly how to remove an electronic products from their box and assemble them for use. So digital words of mouth is basically a viral marketing.